Have you ever been in a meeting, maybe a stand-up, maybe an all hands, maybe a glorified Zoom call that somebody's trying to pass off as community? Have you ever had that moment where you've said to yourself, oh wow, this person has absolutely no clue what they're talking about? There's a moment in every marketer's career when you realize the game is rigged and you understand that there are tons of people that are performing expertise when they don't actually have any. And along the way, you start to realize that competence is often punished. It's not rewarded. And for some reason, the most incompetent people are the ones in charge, getting the most attention, have the biggest followings. What's that all about? So what would happen if you ever said anything about it? What if you finally said the quiet part out loud? What would it look like? What would it feel like to truly be unfuckwithable? Let me take you back to a boardroom in Birmingham, Alabama. I was working at a digital agency. It was a medium shop. And even though we had Exxon and Jimmy Buffett, rest in peace, King, it was still trying to punch above its weight. I was the director of media, marketing, whatever. Which at a place like that meant I did everything from strategy to creative to client management to making sure the coffee machine worked. The call came on a Tuesday. Alexander Shunnarah wanted to meet. If you've never been to Alabama, you don't know Alexander Shunnarah. But if you've driven I-65 between Birmingham and Montgomery, you've seen his billboards. Hell, you've probably seen them as far as Atlanta, Nashville, everywhere. The biggest personal injury attorney in the Southeast. His annual budget for billboards alone was $17 million. Yes, I said Jimmy Buffett earlier. And yes, the office was more enamored with Alexander Shunnarah. They put me in the conference room with nothing but suits everywhere. President, VP, account directors, senior strategists, everyone in their best client meeting attire. And there was my hungover ass, ripped jeans, 2 wristbands still in my arm, and the faint hint of love spell wafted from my everywhere. If you know, you know. Because of course nobody had told me that this was happening until 5 minutes before it started. So, Shunnarah walks in. Bigger than life. The kind of presence that fills a room before he even speaks. The suits start their presentation, slides, data, market analysis, competitive positioning, the whole dog and pony show. Okay, I'll just get to the embarrassing shit. They were asking for more budget to keep doing the same thing that they'd been doing. That's all it was. Nothing jumped out, nothing connected. And you could feel the energy draining from the room by the second. Alexander stops them mid-sentence, and this was one of the most hilarious moments in my entire career. I want to talk to somebody else. That's what he said. Every single head turned. Who else is there to talk to? Well, then he looks at me, at my greasy hair, my single bloodshot eye, my blatant disregard for brogued Oxfords and unlit Cuban cigars. You must be the creative one. Oh, what gave it away? He, of course, laughed. It's the first time anyone had smiled in the room that entire day. Hell, first time anybody's asshole unclenched for even a second. They were terrified of Shunnarah. So what should I do? Every single head turned to me. Silence. Pin drop. At this point in my career, I had reached the point where I was just done. I was done pretending that wearing a suit meant you knew what you were talking about. I was done acting like it was okay to relegate marketers to creatives instead of strategic weapons. And I was done abiding weaponized incompetence. You know what, Alex? You should do whatever the fuck you want to. You could hear the suits collectively hold their breath. I knew I had him. At that very moment, I was unfuckwithable. And I swear on my life that I was this close to actually lighting a cigarette right there in front of everybody in that boardroom. Alexander leans back. Explain, because I clearly don't know what I want to do or what I should do. That's why I'm here, and I'm not impressed. No, you're not impressed with them. Pointing to the dipshits in suits whose asses were currently so clenched again they could crush diamonds. You're not an attorney. You're a celebrity. Act like it. Turn your billboards upside down. Get a booth and make appearances at the local Comic-Con. Who gives a shit? You're Alexander Shunnarah. Law services aren't the product. You are. When I said whatever the fuck you want to, I wasn't just giving you advice. I was telling you what your audience is going to say when they're not talking about the man. They're talking about the myth. Start acting like one. Everything else will follow. He stared at me for what felt like forever. You're smarter than all them, aren't you? when I need to be. Closed won. Not because of the slides or the market analysis or the competitive positioning, because someone finally told him the truth about what business he was actually in. I led his campaign. We threw out everything the suits had proposed, made Shunnarah the hero of his own story instead of just another lawyer with billboards. Who needs another one of those? Good Lord. We turned him into the character he already was, but had been too afraid to embrace. It crushed. Client was thrilled. Agency was making money they'd never seen before. I was the golden boy for exactly 2 months. Different conference room this time. President, VP, and you guessed it, HR. The holy trinity of corporate execution. Today will be your last day with us. Why? Insubordination. We just need somebody who's a better culture fit. Culture of what? Strategic impotence? Weaponized incompetence? Let me translate this for all of you listening. I made them look incompetent in front of the biggest client they'd ever had. I closed a deal that they couldn't close, and I was a marketer. I understood a client that they couldn't understand, and I delivered results that they couldn't deliver. And that was unforgivable. I didn't sleep for a week. I kept wondering if I'd ever work again. Mainly, I was worried about getting thrown out of the loft I'd just rented on the top floor corner of the Wooster building in downtown Birmingham. Spoiler alert, I 100% did. But that's the thing about knowing you're right. You can only lie to yourself for so long. See, here's what I learned in that Birmingham boardroom. The game was never about being good. It was about protecting the people who weren't. The suits didn't get fired for failing to connect with a $17 million budget. I got fired for succeeding where they failed. They'd rather lose the client than admit that they didn't understand the assignment. Because in corporate America, there's nothing more dangerous than competence that makes incompetence obvious. This story isn't unique to me. It's the pattern that repeats everywhere in marketing. The person who tells the truth about attribution gets fired. The person who calls out the broken lead qualification gets let go. The person who creates content that actually serves the audience instead of covering up dysfunction gets shown the door. The person who says, whatever the fuck you want to, instead of performing strategic expertise gets labeled insubordinate. The system doesn't punish failure. It punishes honesty. And that's the problem. Law services aren't the product. You are. That line changed everything for him. And it should change everything for every marketer listening to this. Because most of us are selling the wrong product. We think we're selling tactics and campaigns and strategies. Nope, absolutely not. We're selling ourselves. Our ability to see what others can't. And our capacity to cut through the bullshit and identify what business they're actually in. Whatever the fuck you want to. That's not just what I told Alexander. That's what I'm telling you. You don't need permission to tell the truth. You don't need permission to call out broken systems. You don't need permission to be competent in a room full of people that are performing expertise. Wear ripped jeans to a board meeting if that's who you are. Who cares? You don't need permission to be the person who actually understands the assignment. I'd spent years thinking that they, being the established authority in the corporate world, knew more than me. And yet, the more and more experience I gained, the more I started to think that the vast majority of senior leadership in corporate America are absolute buffoons. And of course, that revelation is table stakes for anybody over the age of 30 nowadays, but getting fired from that job was the best thing that ever happened in my career because it told me one thing I needed to hear in order to become dangerous in this industry. I was right. At that moment, I was 100% unfuckwithable. Which doesn't mean confident. It means you've stopped performing. You've stopped asking for permission, and you've remembered what you're capable of. And it terrifies the people who forgot what real competence looks like. But understand this. Let me be the first to tell you. There will be consequences. The suits will try to fire you for insubordination. The system will punish you for making others look incompetent. The people who can't close deals will resent you especially if you're a marketer. Your competence will be labeled as arrogance. Your honesty will be called unprofessional. Your results will be dismissed as luck. And eventually they might show your ass the door. So you have a choice. You can play it safe, wear the suit, give the presentations that don't offend anyone, ask for more budget to do the same shit that isn't working. You can perform expertise instead of demonstrating it. You can be forgettable, tame, and keep your job. Or you can be the person that walks in the boardroom and tells the truth. You can be the one that understands what business your client is actually in. And you can be the one who gets fired for being too good at the job. Because trust me, if that happens, you didn't want to work there. Because here's what Shunnarah taught me. You are the product. Not your agency, not your company, not your tactics or strategies or your slide decks. You listening right now. You are the product. Your willingness to speak honestly and your courage to be different in a room full of sameness. That's what clients are really buying. And that's what the market really, really needs right now. And as it turns out, oddly enough, that's what the suits can't replicate, no matter how expensive their presentations get. I got fired from that Birmingham agency. Seriously, best thing that ever happened. Because it taught me that playing it safe is quite honestly the most dangerous thing you can do sometimes. And it taught me that being fired for being too good and speaking truth to power and just being honest is better than being kept for being mediocre. So to every marketer listening to this who's sitting in a conference room full of suits, remember that you are not there to make them comfortable. You are there to deliver results. That is your job. You are not there to perform. You are there to demonstrate. And if that gets you fired for insubordination, if somebody doesn't like you, if somebody tries to weed you out, if you get put on a PIP, good. The revolution was never going to come from the people with the most to lose. That's not how change is affected. Real change. It's coming from the people who understand that competence is more valuable than comfort. From the people that would rather be fired for being right, kept for being wrong. And Shunnarah, well, he became that myth, let me tell you. Not because of the suits, but because somebody finally told him the truth about what kind of story his audience wanted to believe. I never saw Alexander Shunnarah again after I got fired. I heard through the grapevine that he kept running variations of that campaign for years. The one that positioned him as a celebrity, as an attorney in Alabama, instead of just some ambulance chaser. The one that understood what business he was actually in. And the one that the suits couldn't have pulled out of their ass if they had 100 years. An old friend recently sent me a picture of an upside down billboard recently. Still there. And me? Well, I'm still here. Still wearing ripped jeans to important meetings. Still telling clients what they need to hear instead of what they want to hear. Still believing that honesty and conviction and competence is the foundation of all great marketing. Because that's what this voice is for the people who understood the assignment, for the people who deliver results instead of excuses. Because in a world that punishes competence, the most revolutionary thing you could do is whatever the fuck you want to. Thanks for listening. If this hits something real, pass it on. Reach is where I process the cost, and burn it down is where I expose the system that created it. You can subscribe to both if you're done pretending that any of this is normal. One is for the silence, one is for the fire. Visit burnitdown.marketing to go deeper. And if you want more reach, subscribe or leave a review. That's how things keep going.